Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. And today I have a kind of a different video for you guys. I did just finish my first week of college, so I would like to thank everyone for their well wishes. A lot of you last week, with last week's video, you guys were sending a lot of well wishes and stuff, and I really appreciate that. The week did go well. It went better than I could have expected it to, so I pray that it keeps going well. But I do appreciate that, and I thought before I got caught up with, doing homework and stuff like that over the rest of the weekend, I thought I would go ahead and make this video because I do really enjoy making videos and doing things that are fun, not just studying, and because I've been pretty focused on work this past week. But I wanted to go ahead and make this video just because I really do enjoy doing them. But anyway, which if you've seen the title of this video, which you probably have, you probably wouldn't be here if you hadn't seen the title. I am doing my Beatles favorites. So, for instance, my favorite Beatles member, my favorite song, album, I did get this idea from one of my favorite YouTubers ever, A Beautiful Life. You've probably seen her if you've watched her videos. If you're watching my video, chances are you've seen hers because she is so much better than me at doing videos and stuff like that. So, but if you haven't, I will link her channel link below. So you should definitely go check her out if you have not already. But anyway, yeah, let's just go ahead and get into the video. So I'm gonna start with my favorite Beatles album. So my favorite Beatles album is Apt to Change, and it has a lot, especially as I was, becoming a bigger fan. With each album that I would delve into, each one would be a different favorite for me. I really have about 3 favorites. My absolute favorite, though, the one that doesn't usually change, is Revolver. I really love Revolver because it does have a lot of innovation, a lot of variety in the tracks. You go from Eleanor Rigby to Good Day Sunshine, and it's just incredible. You've got I'm Only Sleeping, which has, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it has the very first backwards guitar track on it. You have Love You Too, which is very Indian, and then you've got Here, There and Everywhere, which is, very much a ballad. And then, there's just Tomorrow Never Knows on here, which is one of the most psychedelic, experimental, avant-garde pieces of music. At that time, I imagine it was one of the most avant-garde pieces of music. And so it's just incredible. You've got so much happening, so much, they were really pushing the boundaries of music at that time, or of the time, and it was just, this album I think is the first example of them doing that and pushing the boundaries. So I really love this album. Some of my favorite songs ever, like Eleanor Rigby, that's one of my favorite songs ever from the Beatles, which I'll get into that in a second, so I don't want to spoil anything. And then I love songs like, Good Day Sunshine and Got to Get You Into My Life, Tomorrow Never Knows, She Said, there's so many amazing ones, and I think listening to this album from start to finish is just such a treat. I do also really love Magical Mystery Tour, though. I don't really count this as a favorite album necessarily, though, because it's broken up into a lot of, it's a soundtrack. The A side is the soundtrack, and then the B side is very much just a collection of singles. So I don't really count this album in particular as being like a great Beatles album, and as far as production, I think it's just more of a collection of songs, if you will. But the collection of songs, saying that, they're amazing. They're great, and you got Penny Lane, Strawberry Fields, Hello Goodbye, Magical Mystery Tour, Fool on the Hill, tons of different stuff. So I do really like the selection on this one. I will say another favorite of mine, though, is Sgt. Pepper. This was the first studio album that I ever listened to by the Beatles, so it has a lot of memories for me. And I have to say, if I'm picking a favorite album in terms of listening to it from start to finish and it being a fantastic production, I'd have to say Sgt. Pepper is my favorite. Not discrediting Revolver, but I just think this album, we think of it as somewhat of a concept album, so of course it does flow very well, and it is very much an experience to listen to. So I just think it's great, you know. I think the introduction, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, is incredible. She's Leaving Home is incredible. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Lovely Rita. There's just so many great ones. And then, of course, to top it all off, it ends with A Day in the Life, which is, you know, talked about as probably one of the best Beatles songs ever. So I do think this one's very good too. Okay, now moving into my favorite Beatles song. Again, I would like to say that this changes a lot, but it honestly doesn't. I have two favorites, two main favorites, one of which is Eleanor Rigby, because that was the song that got me into the Beatles and introduced me to them and how amazing they are and how talented they are in terms of lyric writing and musicianship. I was just completely taken in by the sound of Eleanor Rigby when I first heard it, the melancholic, you know, the strings and the aggressive, you know, staccato movements of that, and then the lyrics themselves are so poetic and they tell such a vivid story and they have so much great imagery that I was just instantly drawn into it. And so I still love the song to this day. It's one of my absolute favorites. It's perfect. You know, it's one of those perfect songs. My other favorite Beatles song would be my favorite in terms of, you know, both music and the meaning. I think this next song, favorite of mine, has the best meaning of any Beatles song ever, and that's Let It Be. I think it's very emotional because, of course, the story behind it is very emotional. It's very almost spiritual, in my opinion. I just get a lot from it. I think the lyrics are so comforting and so true. I just think it's a great song, and then, you know, musically it's beautiful. One of the best melodies I think exists. It is just perfect, you know, and it's executed, you know, Paul's singing is executed with such raw emotion, and it's just perfect. I really think it is. It's such a great song. All right, my favorite Beatles member. This is probably not a surprise to anyone, but my favorite Beatles member is Paul McCartney, which is ironic because when I first started liking the Beatles, he was the only one that I said I would not like because everyone else seemed to already like him. I kind of played a game with myself. I guessed that I would like John or George the best. And so I tried to like one of them the best, but the more I learned about each one individually and their personalities and then what they contributed to the band in terms of the music, things like that, I just ended up really, really liking Paul McCartney. And, you know, especially his personality, I just really, I don't want to say related to, but I guess I did. The way he sees things and saw things, I tend to agree with more than maybe the other three. But all of that came after I had already fallen in love with the music that he contributed and, you know, lyrics that he contributed, etc., etc. So after I fell in love with the music that he wrote, then I began to think that he was a pretty cool person on top of all of that. But anyway, you know, I don't discredit the other three. The other three are amazing. I just personally relate to Paul's music more and his messages more, and again, his viewpoints a little bit more, and his melodies. I don't know, man, they do something for my soul that I cannot explain. No other musician has ever done that for me. Paul McCartney was the first musician to really take my soul somewhere. So anyway, I do like Paul a lot. And it's not because, by the way, a lot of people think I only like him because he's the cute Beatle. That's not true. It really is not true. I fell in love with his music first and foremost, and, you know, any kind of, oh, I like his personality or whatever, all of that came way after I had already really loved his music, so that's not true. I just want to clear the air on that. All right, my favorite Beatles movie. Okay, so I'm gonna have to pick a movie that they were actually in and that they made during, you know, their time together. This is really hard, but I think my favorite would have to be Help. Again, I remember talking about this in my DVD collection video. I like the plot. Obviously it's silly. I like the music better. I think it's really fun and ridiculous. I really love the jokes and stuff in it. It's very funny to me. I do, however, I like Magical Mystery Tour as well, but I like Magical Mystery Tour more for the art of it. I love the music and then the musical sequences, like the music videos, if you will. I just think they're very artistic and very skillfully done. So I do like that movie as well, but I don't have it, so I'm gonna have to see if I can find that one somewhere. But anyway, and finally, my favorite Beatles era. This is difficult. This is very difficult because I'm gonna have to go musically and then in terms of like appearance and things like that. Musically, I would have to say I prefer the later Beatles. I like more of that experimental, artsy kind of vibe, if you will. And I say that like 66 and onward. I like all of that kind of music a little bit better. I like some experimentation. I like some flavor and something I've never heard before. And I think Sgt. Pepper is a great example of that. I guess it was the first studio album I listened to, so it makes sense that I would prefer that sound a little bit more. But in terms of like appearance and the general mood or whatever, aesthetic, I guess if you will, I would prefer the earlier Beatles, the mop top, you know, the suits, ties. I think that's very appealing and it's very clean, and it just looks nice. So I do prefer the earlier Beatles, and also because they were a little bit more innocent. That, you know, fame hadn't really taken its toll on them quite as much as it had after 66. I think they were still very young and energetic at the time, you know, I'd say 65 and before that, you know, they were excited to make their mark on the world. And I think once they actually did it, it began to take its toll naturally. I mean, they were sought after everywhere, you know, the most famous people on the planet, and you're having to deal with that. So I think, and after Brian Epstein died, I think that also kind of took away their, you know, vigor and energy, but not enough to where they didn't make amazing music, which again is why I prefer the later music, but with, you know, I prefer the earlier appearance of the Beatles. So anyway, okay, well, that was my Beatles favorites. I really hope you enjoyed this. I know it was a little different. I'm not really showing a lot of stuff. I'm talking, and that's probably not good because I don't talk very well. I'm like Aaron in the Bible. I'm like, you know, Lord, I can't speak. I'm stuttering and stumbling. But anyway, I hope I didn't annoy you too much, and please let me know what some of your Beatles favorites are. You could even like make a list in the comments of your favorites, just like I did in each category, and tell me. And I'd love to know, you know, I want to know, like, if we share any common favorites or not. That would be fun. So I love talking to you guys. I love, you know, interacting and all that stuff, so I really appreciate it. So anyway, if you really like this video, please do give it a like and subscribe to my channel again. We're almost to 500, and that's the magic number, so I would really appreciate it if we could get there. So yeah, thanks very much for watching. Bye-bye.